Hello, I'm Bill Young, and in this episode of Swishes, Armin Scharlach and I are talking about presence and influence. If you'd like to join a Swishes podcast, just let us know. Hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome to the Swishes podcast. This time we have Armin Scharlach and Bill Young here. We're going to do a double act. What we're talking about is presence and influence. But first, let's talk a little bit about what that is. To my mind, presence and influence are quite close to impact. Well, what do you think, Armin?
Presence makes a distinction whether people are voluntarily willing to help you getting things done, whether in your personal life or in your business life doesn't make any difference. I think we all know that we can have a more successful life if we have others supporting us. And there are situations where being a manager, you might have subordinates which you can simply instruct to do certain things. Very often you don't have that direct mandate, but even if you have it, you might not always get the quality that you want to get if you're just playing the dictator role. This is why it is so important to win people to help you. And this is where communication is then the direct prerequisite to get influence and impact on your personal objectives and goals.
You see, the way you're describing it sounds like some fairly sophisticated soft skills. Isn't there something else? I'm not quite sure what it is, but I think it's about a personal brand, a character, something that people recognize and associate with other images and characteristics, and it builds a sense of trust. So you sort of inherit something maybe even greater than yourself by behaving in a certain way. Is that fair?
I'm with you. The brand element, if you can build that up, gives you even the advantage that you already have an impact on the other people's attention before you enter the room, because they already know something about yourself. What I always find admirable, and I still haven't really figured out what it is, that there are some people who have a natural presence and gravitas when they enter a room. And even if you have never met them before, all of a sudden you recognize something has changed in the room. People are looking to this very person for whatever reason, pay attention to what he or she is doing. And like I said, I have not yet really figured out what it is. I know two people in my personal network who have that talent, and I try to observe them whenever I can. I try to learn from them whenever I can, but I have not found the answer really yet.
Well, here's a question for you, Armin. Do you think that this difficult to bottle thing is necessary for promotion within a company? I do. I believe that although many more senior people may not be the ideal, I think you can see degrees of what we're trying to describe in more senior people. And when you spot junior people who have aspirations, sometimes you're able to say instantly, no, you're not suitable for that sort of role. And in other cases, you're tempted to believe, yes, maybe you are. And I think we're getting to this hard to define thing.
I'm with you that seniority is a shortcut to having that gravitas. The traditional image of a grayback entering the room who just by the physical appearance all this signals I'm the boss in the room certainly helps. But it is not limited to that physical appearance or the age of someone, because I know, as I mentioned, two people at least who already in their young ages had that talent. When they entered the room, everyone was looking up, was sensing something has changed with the energy level in the room, and was paying to attention.
I'm agreeing with you. I don't think it comes with seniority and age. I'm saying that I think it leads to people have confidence in the younger self, the younger person, and as a result they get that promotion. So I'm saying the reason it's associated with higher levels is not that the higher levels are the reason they have it, but the reason they have their seniority is because they have this thing we're trying to define.
I like that idea that I think that is something that people can practice. When I said earlier, there are people who have that talent that would eventually let people think that, oh, I don't have that talent. I have no chance to ever really benefit from being influential and becoming such a person. But there is a lot someone can learn and improve by, in my opinion, two things. A, observing people who have that already and then asking yourself this meta question, not just what is this person saying content wise. I guess most of us, when we are sitting in a business meeting, we are spending 70 to 80% of our attention on what is said and not how it is said. But if you are at least once in a while, if you have such a person of a particular influence in the room, you take yourself mentally aside from the content and go on that meta level and ask yourself, what is he or she doing that makes it so attractive to listen and to agree to what he or she is saying?
I think that's
Beyond
powerful.
just the content as such is a very important exercise that everyone should do once in a while.
That's super. And I think we've moved now from the what is it that we'd like to put in a bottle and sell into how do you get it? And I think the observation thing is extraordinarily powerful. Not enough of us look at how something is said and what behaviors are being exhibited. We tend to concentrate too much on the words when we're trying to analyze why something happened.
A little personal story. A good friend of mine, his name is Wolfgang. He has that talent. If you put him into a business class seat or in a business lounge at the airport, after the flight, he knows everyone else and everyone else knows him in a positive way. I'm still far away from that. But I took it as a challenge for myself to at least try not just to spend the 8 hours on the seat all by myself with headphones and noise cancellation on and at my computer in front of myself and not talking to anyone else at all, but use it as a training exercise.
Does this person, what's his name?
Wolfgang.
Does Wolfgang circulate? Does he go up to people? Does he ask them questions about themselves? Is he interested in other people?
It is a combination of that. I think that interest in other people is an important thing that you mentioned, because that is something that people sense whether someone is just playing a certain instrument. And I think we all have seen, when I was young, I was looking for, fortunately, a very short while into insurance brokerage, where these companies were trying to find young people to motivate them selling their personal network to make a little money for doing their studies. But there you're learning tools that you're applying, and the other side is recognizing that you're just applying instruments.
That's just manipulation.
But if it feels
selling.
natural, and exactly. But if the other person feels that you really have an interest in them, it's almost always the case that they are instantly opening up. One of the elements that I learned in a training many years ago, and that I'm practicing since then quite frequently, is the super simple mechanism of give something personal from yourself and you will likely get something personal from the other person in return. And if you're then an active listener, so you're not just checking off something on your to-do list, but you're really listening to what the other person is saying and you build on that. That's a great start for establishing a trustful early relationship with someone.
I've sometimes called it generosity. If you have a generous persona and you are seen as trying to help other people.
And it feels uncomfortable if you're telling a personal detail in a business conversation to someone you might have never met before, but it is worth trying. Obviously, it should be not too personal. It needs a little practice, but only if you practice, you will find out what is the right level that you can do, and you start creating a certain sense on what is the right thing for an individual person on the other side, because you're not always telling the same opener, but you're practicing a little bit different ones, and you find out which ones work better for what kind of counterpart.
You mentioned something about the response culture in the online world, and I think I responded by saying, yes, you do have to respond, but by more than just a sort of happy face or a thumbs up sign. That looks shallow. Whereas if you can give a considered response when it's appropriate. That seems to me to be a generous thing to do, to show that you have actually read the email or the message or heard it, thought about it, and are responding in a way that shows consideration and respect, rather than just a thumbs up sign. Is that relevant?
I like it, and I would be already happy if people at least would use a thumbs up sign, because it has never been easier to respond to someone. When I remember my childhood days, and we got Christmas or birthday letters from our uncles and my grandparents, our parents needed to force us quite a bit to sit down and write a response letter, and that was quite a labor-intensive thing to do, but nowadays it has become so easy to respond. And I wonder why people not even doing this kind of response anymore. At least what I'm observing, I'm not sure, and this is a question to the audience, what they are seeing and how they're reacting when they get a personalized message, whether it's an email or whether it is a voicemail or whether it is a letter. I'm not talking about a spam mail from Prince of Nigeria. That's clear. No one needs to reply to those, of course. But if someone is sending someone else a personalized letter, even if you don't have the time to give a comprehensive answer immediately, not at least to reply, I have seen your message, I will think about it and get back to you in due time.
If you happen to be a parent, or more so a grandparent, let me illustrate what you've just said by saying how important a thank you note, not expecting it, and it comes as a surprise when you do get one. But I tell you what, when you do get a thank you note from a child to whom you've given a birthday or a Christmas present or a one-off, it goes in the family album. It gets treasured, it gets put in a drawer and kept, and it gets a date put on it. And sometimes these little things can be so undervalued. They have an immense value.
Absolutely. And when we talked about influence in business, someone who is at least spending these 5 seconds to either send you a single sentence reply or maybe even just a thumbs up or a smiley, you will have a complete different view on that person than if you never hear back from someone anything at all.
There's a danger in here, isn't there? I mean, well, I'm speaking very personally now. I'm a bit of an introvert and not a strong public speaker, but when I do get positive feedback, I tend to take it too much to heart. And I'll give you a couple of examples that fit together. In meetings, someone once said to me, you've got to, I don't know if I still do, but I have a reasonably deep voice and I speak normally fairly slowly. And they said, that's quite effective, Bill. You don't need to say things more than once, although you sometimes do, but it carries quite an impact. And unfortunately, I took it too much to heart and I started to speak even more slowly and with a deeper voice. And I had this impression that it was making me sound authoritative. And it wasn't. It was just making me sound stupid. To the extent that one day I was talking at a conference and I prepared the whole thing and I did exactly what I'd prepared and it didn't go well. And I spotted a friend, mentor in the audience and I said, wasn't good, was it? And he said, it could have been a bit better. I said, so what was I doing wrong? And he said, you were speaking too slowly. You were behaving as though you were in a one-to-one or in a meeting and you had to painfully explain things. And to be honest, people lost confidence. They thought that you didn't know what was coming next. And a sudden realization, without constant and informal feedback, you're not able to tune your style to the situation. And I was using a meeting style where there are 1 or 2 people sitting around me and applying it to a conference of 60 to 100 people, and where you needed to be upbeat and positive and a little bit injecting more energy and giving them confidence that you knew the subject and all they had to do was follow you. You with me? Do you see that?
Absolutely. And I would comment on that from 2 perspectives. When I mentioned earlier, it's good to look for role models where you can learn something from. There is one area where you have the most brutal need to keep people's attention, and that's YouTube. If you are a YouTuber, I'm not, but if you watch YouTube from time to time, you will recognize that it's all about making the audience stay in the story and not go to the next video. And one of the things that I learned a couple of months ago, what most of the YouTubers are doing, what I've never recognized while watching these videos, is that they have someone cutting away all the short pauses you would typically have in a typical conversation in order to get things going quickly.
I learned that the other day because one of our colleagues in Swishes was doing a recording of stories, personal stories. And I thought this is going to be a bit dull. But she edited it so well and so aggressively that it came alive. It looked odd to me because is that really me? But it was pretty effective. And I thought,
in order to practice this, in order to find out what is the right style, I wouldn't say technique, the right style for someone, it's all about practicing things. And that's the second element that I wanted to comment. When I had a lot of juniors in my team that came not from the traditional consulting schools with the MBA in their pocket and tons of presentation courses and classes that they already had in the past. But I had a lot of analytics people in my team. They were brilliant minds, but not necessarily always the best experienced communicators. What I did with those was that we established something similar to the debate club that you find at British and American universities. We called it the presentation club, where we met on a Friday once a month. And it was not about everyone presenting a different thing, but we had 4 people who had been given the very same story to talk about, or the very same presentation to them. It wasn't really matter whether it was a PowerPoint presentation or was just a story. And then they had 10 minutes on the stage to give it their twist, how they would bring that story across to the others. And after 10 minutes, we had a 5-minute self-reflection so that the person on stage was thinking about, what did I do well? What would I do different next time? Plus the feedback from the others in the room. And then the next person went on stage and gave his or her twist on the very same story, the very same presentation. And by doing so, you could compare what worked well before, what have people adopted and incorporated. And almost always the 4th presentation, we always had an hour. So 4th of these slots was exactly needing an hour. The 4th presentation was by far the best one, not because the 4th speaker was by the talent or nature the better presenter or speaker, but because they had seen and thought through what had been working well in the sessions before and incorporate that sometimes intentionally, sometimes unintentionally into their twist of it. And it was an amazing experience. And this is why everyone who would like to practice communication skills, I can highly recommend to do a similar format with a couple of trusted peers, whether it's friends or colleagues, to do that exercise once in a while. We did it one Friday a month for an hour. And typically after 4, 5, 6 months, they were 1,000,000 times better than at the start.
That's very powerful. And I think it plays to something I've suspected, and that is that people don't get enough practice. By practice, I don't just mean doing it. I mean the doing, the feedback, the reconsider, and then do it again and repeat. And repeat,
that's the point. It's the repetition that is important. Everyone is communicating all the time, and you might also get some feedback once in a while, but they have never then the chance to redo things. I feel myself extremely lucky that and as part of my career, and I think I mentioned that to you in an earlier conversation, I spent a couple of years in a sales position selling procurement software. And if you do that as a pre-sales manager, it's all about the content, but it's also about the story that you make around it. But my huge advantage to all of my consulting colleagues, when a consultant is presenting in a pitch, it's always completely custom tailored to the very specific problem of the client, and you do that pitch once and never again. My pitch on the software solutions was more or less the same every time. I gave it variations in order to see what works better, what did not work so well. And if you then have sometimes 6 of these presentations a week, you have this brilliant feedback channel in place where you get an information and a response, what works, what doesn't work so well. And I'm extremely grateful for that part of my career. It paid out way beyond just having had a good job at the time.
I'll give you an anecdote against myself, and it's the opposite story. It is not having the feedback. Went on a training course about, it was sort of sales and representation, how to represent the organization. They went on and on and on about asking questions. Everything was in the question. And we did I keep 6 honest serving men. They taught me all I knew. Their names are what and why and when and where and how and who. A Kipling poem, and it was all, what's the reason for that? Why do you do that? And we were taught to just go out and plaster the world with questions. Mm-hmm. So I found myself talking to a potential client of the company. Suddenly he turned around to me and I swear this is what he said: "I don't have to stand here and answer your fucking questions." And it was...
It's such a great story, and it reminds me on one of the things that consultants are typically taught in these communication classes, that they should find out what keeps the client awake at night, which makes totally sense if you think about it. But the worst thing you can do is to start a meeting. I'm here to learn about what keeps you awake at night.
Yeah. Well, I confess, this guy who told me to fuck off, I owe him a debt I can never repay, because he taught me more in that sentence about self-awareness and knowing, having some idea of how you're being perceived than anyone has ever since, I have to say.
And coming back to your very initial thought about brand, I think if you are then getting better in that, it builds up a certain reputation, and then by spread of mouth, you have an advantage because people are already expecting something that is better than the usual and are paying more attention to what you're doing. And therefore, it is really helpful to build on that, and ideally to also think about how can you find ambassadors for your behalf. One of the things that I think we all know that works best when you want to sell something, anything more or less, is if you have a credible testimonial of someone else that you did business with before, whether it's a customer or a supplier, doesn't really matter for in that purpose, but having a testimonial. And the very best testimonial I've ever seen, and it was not about myself, and this is why I can report it so well here, is from an ex-colleague of mine that I highly appreciated. His name was Joris, and he got once a testimonial from the CEO of the Swiss Railways, where this CEO was saying something along the lines how much he is annoyed when consultants are coming up and ask him what keeps him awake at night, and how much he laughs when he talks to consultants who know what keeps him awake at night. He like Joris. If you have someone else saying that about you, so that it's not you having to claim, I know everything and I can be your trusted friend and everything, but you have someone else saying that about you, that is gold.
That's one of the reasons that Swissues exists, because anybody can come on. Welcome to come on podcasts and welcome to come on open meets. And it is an opportunity for people to say what's on their mind, to come out with ideas that might not be fully thought through, and get a reaction, and then get an assessment for how they performed, how they sold their idea, how they discussed it. This should be a safe environment for people. I hope it is.
That's one of the reasons why I'm joining this. The other reason is that I always find it inspirational, exchanging thoughts with you guys. What I like in particular from the context that you just mentioned is that it is audio only, because it helps you to really focus on one dimension and not having to master all of a sudden also the presentation in the background, your physical appearance, your body language, etc., etc. But it helps to focus, and if you are using it as an opportunity, not just to think about what you're saying, but how you're saying it, it's a great training ground.
Well, Armin, you're absolutely right. We've got to start with audio. There's no doubt about that. The video adds another really difficult dimension. But if we manage to improve a little bit, you never know what might happen next, where we might go.
As silly as it is, if you would think about business communication and you do certain things that are outside of the norm, you probably also have met some people in your long career who, instead of wearing a tie, were wearing a bow tie.
Yep, I've done that myself on one or two
already
outrageous
made
occasions.
a difference when people are sitting in the room, whether it's always to the better or the worse. That doesn't matter for the moment, but it makes a difference. And with these elements and trying to find out what works in a particular context that will make someone more successful.
Yeah, we must wind up shortly, but on the bow tie one, there is an element of impact and character and influence that I think is important, and that is consistency. And if you are consistent in what you do, you build character and image that sticks in people's mind, and they know what they're about to get, and they feel confident in your presence. But, and this is where the bow tie reminded me, I did for a bit of fun wear a bow tie for a while, but it was so out of character. It's not me. I'm an introvert. The rest of my character didn't fit with wearing a bow tie. I think it just made people feel uneasy. That's my suspicion, that if you do things that are out of character, people think, what's wrong with him? Is he having a midlife crisis? So anyway, I think consistency is a really important thing whenever you're looking at presence and influence. Or maybe we should finish there, shouldn't we? And then
absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Armin, been great to discuss this with you today, because it's always in the back of my mind every time I hear people present, and I'm thinking you really do need some feedback on how you're coming across. And we all need to seek that, don't we? All of the time.
Absolutely, because whether in your private life or in the professional life even more, when people think that their career would be determined by their knowledge and their experience, that is a facilitator or an enabler, a prerequisite. But the real progress you're doing when you're gaining people's trust that you can solve problems, and that trust is way more than just having experience and expertise. I learned it in the shortest possible form from an ex-colleague who always referred to his mantra, perception is reality, and damn is he right with that.
Yeah, perception shapes access, which I quite liked. And the footnote to it was, you may know your value, but others act on what they see. Confidence, clarity, and composure create access to the rooms that matter.
And I think we have had a couple of good examples in our conversation that some people are gifted with a talent, but for the rest of us, it is about being aware that it is important to reflect on it, both yourself and ideally from some trusted people around you.
Okay, let's finish there then, Armin, and thank you very much indeed. I've enjoyed that feedback, especially since it was the topic, and we'll sign off.
Looking forward to see you next time, Bill.
Thank you, Armin. Bye.